I'm Rod Duff from Insights and Straight Talk. And with that, folks, I am out. Hey, I'm kind of growing, that's as you know, the people that have been here for a little while, I've been working on those intro or what's called trailers by the software. And I'm kind of growing on that one. I really like it. I think it's pretty good. And now I'm going to be working on the outro, which I think is good now, but I want to kind of do some talk over stuff that maybe helps it out a little bit more. But all that aside, I've been telling you guys, I've been extremely excited. And George, you will see the fake Coke, and you'll see the sipping on the regular Coke, and it's part of my gig, part of my inadequacies. But anyway, we George, who I was just talking to, is George Haymaker. He has got a fascinating story, and one that, quite frankly, and I told him earlier, is personal. A number of these are, because when you get into addictions and you get into mental health and the wiring of the brain, to some degree, we're humans, so we're susceptible to a lot of things. But some of us more than others, I don't know why. I mean, there's probably a little bit of exposure. George, I'm sure you'll tell us a little bit of exposure, your social environment, learning those scene skills, so to speak. And I understand some of it's a genetic, of course. You're wired a different way. And then I've kind of heard a couple of people talking about, these genetics to some degree go all the way back to when we were hunter-gatherers. And so, all these different effects are why we need people coaching, helping up. Hey, there's producer Barbie. Hey, George, meet producer Barbie. I was just telling you about her. Anyway, I've had enough. I got as many words out as I had to for the second. I'm going to bring George on because he's fascinating, really funny guy. Really, as we're talking about, he's got a sexy radio voice. So with that introduction, I hope he doesn't hit me later when we're there's George Haymaker. How are you, sir? I've been so excited about this. Yep. Wait. What am I missing? Oh,
looks like I've been muted.
There it is.
I've been muted, I guess.
Anyway. Well, I told you I like to screw around with people, and yeah, it's a little harsh, but I figured
I haven't even said a bad word yet, and you already muted me.
Well, I like to be in control, so I just sometimes just got to jab something out there, George.
You are in control. I'm the passenger.
No, not at all. You are I am the passenger. And as we were talking about, this show is all about concerns and engaging and uplifting the middle class, the great middle class, who just happens to be the backbone of our country, and by extension, the world, because we need leaders and all those things happen, but we need to improve our knowledge, our information. Elites have so much access to things of information and importance. What you're talking about is critically important, and yet we don't have as much. I find out from this show on a regular basis how much information's out there that's needed that just never either bothered to be sent on, or for whatever reason isn't there, but it's real. So thank you, George, for coming along. And as producer Barbie says, exciting show. Can't wait for the information to be shared. Life change. Yeah, you should have seen my video, man. Not my video, my advertiser. I think she's referring to that. It was pretty good. You got to see it. I asked you if you saw it. You haven't seen it yet. You got to check it out. Anyway, George, you got to talk here. I've been doing it for 5 minutes and just rolling you over here. Give us a little background. I know we're talking about a couple of bottles of vodka and 50 pain pills a day, kind of. that's, I hope that's an exaggeration, because I don't know how you're still alive.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not an exaggeration. That's how it ended up, and that's where addiction can take us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was, probably 30 some years into my use of, substances to cope with underlying mental
And you're
discomfort.
building up this tolerance all along, and so you got to do more and more and more, right? Sorry for cutting you off, but right?
Yeah, that's what happens in addiction, is that
Yeah.
the brain is just not used to that much dopamine being flooded into the brain, and so it begins to malfunction the neurons. It's too much dopamine, and so the neurons begin to shut down, and so you have to keep doing more and more for the dopamine to get through,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's what really tolerance is.
Okay, let's pause for a second there. The way you just described that is a little different than I tell people I'll dig in deeper and ask questions, because I am the bottom of everybody watching and listening. I'm the least capable. If I understand it, everybody's going to understand it.
You're the
So the
layman.
way, what's that?
You're the layman.
I am the absolute best at being a layman. I am that's my best feature.
Superpower.
That's my superpower. Excellent. So when you said that the neurons, right, shut down, I thought it was something totally different, like your body. I don't know what I thought, but that was fascinating when you say the neurons shut down after too much endorphins pumping at it, and then what happens is you got to take more to push it past those neurons still, or open that up a little bit.
Yeah, so neurons connect to one another. That's what neural
Right.
pathways are made of. They're strings of neurons, and they represent everything in our mental life. And in between those neurons are synapses, or spaces, and and chemical gets transferred from one neuron to the next. That's how they signal and communicate. So when we do an addictive substance or anything that makes us feel good, dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter, a chemical, transfers from one neuron to the next, and that's the feeling of pleasure that we experience. So when you're
Right.
basically trying to flood 500 gallons of water through a little garden hose, that's what happens during addiction, and so you're flooding so much
Wow.
chemical through there that the receptors on the other side of the other neuron just have never experienced that much dopamine. It's not made for that. And so they begin to
Right.
shut down some of those receptors. And so now fewer and fewer receptors are available to receive that dopamine. So you're having to flood more and more through to get through the limited receiving capability. That's what tolerance is.
So basically, the more you do it, the less able you're actually able to feel happy or feel that pleasure feeling. So you got to do more to. Boy, that's a vicious circle, huh? That
Well,
is that's a bit. Oh, go ahead.
haven't you ever experienced or heard someone tell you that the best buzz they ever got was the very first one?
Yes, I hear that. I always have heard that. Absolutely.
And then we're chasing it ever since, and it never quite measures up. And that's what's happening in the brain, is that those receptors start to shut down, and
It's
so we
falling
aren't
short.
getting as much pleasure. So we keep chasing it, trying to flood more and more and more dopamine to get the similar feeling, and it just it just never ends up that way. So that's how you end up 30 years later doing 50 pain pills a day and drinking 2 bottles of vodka. Is that the neurons are shutting down, and you're just trying to stay alive and feel normal.
I'm still amazed that you're here, that your body didn't shut down, not just the neurons over time, right? I mean, I get it. We believe me, I get it. But what's here, and this question here kind of leads us into some things here, unless I still want to cover the background, but like this guy's saying here, Bradley, how did you first realize that neuroscience could help your recovery? I mean, it's in some ways it's kind of obvious. neuroscience, your recovery, what you just talked about. How did you come to that and so forth?
Yeah,
And
that
so
was
whatever that meant.
well into my recovery process. I started out in AA, just basically doing what I was told, and I just became. I'm a kind of guy that needs to know the whys and hows and wherefores. And I remember sitting in rehab at the age of 52, saying to myself, "How the hell did I get here? And is
Oh,
this
wow.
what my life is going to be all about? Right? Is this what it's come down to?"
Do
And
you mind?
so,
I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off, forgive me here, but do you mind? How old are you?
64.
Oh my God. I'm same age as you, and you look like you're 50. I thought you were a lot young. How, dude, you got it figured out, but
You got to
either
you got to start drinking the beet tea and stop drinking that fake Coke.
well, that's a good point. That is a good point. But you've survived physically and mentally, and that's inspiring as hell. So back to your point, I know I cut you off, but I didn't want to lose that. And so many things happen, as you know, while you're talking, and each one is better in different ways. And sometimes that point, I just got to get it there, or it's never gonna come out. I just wanted to give you blow a little smoke up your dress. You look fantastic, sir.
Well, thank you. I use some good facial cream. Um, so getting back to the point is, so addiction happens in the brain. And so during my recovery process, I wanted to know more and more about why I ended up the way I was and this change I was trying to go through, how it was actually going to occur. And so all change happens in the brain, addiction happens in the brain. So it led me to the brain. And I just became so fascinated by the science behind how the brain operates, how addiction affects it, and how the rewiring or the change would happen to lead me into a better life. That I just went down that rabbit hole and started reading everything I could about neuroscience, and then I started taking graduate level coursework on it, and got my certification in coaching. And if it really helps to understand the brain in order to get your arms around how you're going to recover from addiction, because that's where it all happens, is in the brain.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And it's kind of inspiring in that, well, I'm not going to overuse that word, but it's kind of interesting how, and to me, it's because you kind of were driven later in life towards a different goal, a different path than you grew up expecting or being, right?
Yeah, addiction will do that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a real crossroads. It's a bottom. I mean, I hit a hard wall. And so everything at that point, everything's on the table. Everything, you basically have taken all the studs down off the foundation. You're back to the foundation. Who am I? What do I want to be? What are my values? Who is this person I know I didn't like the person that got me here. What does that person look like that I want to become? And then you just basically start, as a contractor
Awesome.
does, start putting studs up on a new foundation and start building your life back.
That is that is obviously absolutely true. Oh, Ariel's been on here a couple of times. She always asks great questions too. As far as what's the hardest part of rewiring your brain? I don't want to quite get there yet, but I do. I'm interested when you talk about bringing it all the way. So did this happen through your time with AA at all, or?
Yeah.
Because I know the program. So you look inward, right? You do self-evaluation, however deep that is. But is that what you're talking about there when you say you bring addiction causes you to be a certain thing? To recover, you'll always be an addict, but to recover, you have to break it down to the studs. How did you that's not the the thinking of an addict. That's like you said, the way the brain's rewired. Where did you get that from? Where did you receive that? Because it's point on, spot on.
Well, in a 12-step program, there are concepts that relate to what I'm talking about. Getting rid of ego is, and being humble and being willing to accept suggestion and change, is the idea of deconstructing the house and getting it down to the foundation. You're also, obviously making amends to people that you've harmed. You're ridding yourself of resentment. So basically, you're taking all that dilapidation from the house and shedding it, deconstructing it, taking all the studs down so that you can rebuild yourself. Because all those remnants of everything that you've experienced, getting you to that point, have not served you well. And so that's what.
No.
Yeah, and so that all needs to be shed so that we can build anew, with a whole new way of thinking, emoting, acting, behaving, and those are the studs that we, rebuild our future self with, all on a new foundation built on values, motivations, goals, aspirations that represent this new person, that we want to be. And so that's a way of describing rewiring. So while this is going on, the brain is being rewired. I wanted to know specifically about, what's happening in the brain, because you can go through this process and have zero idea that the brain's involved or what's happening in the brain.
Exactly. Yes.
But that is really physiologically, that is what's happening. However you get there, that's your brain is reorganizing itself. Neurons are shifting around. It's almost like if you look at a Rand McNally map of the United States with all the roads, okay, picture that as your brain, okay, all those little neurons connected to each other, forming these strings that are all going different directions. Okay, you have developed that mapping for your brain and addiction that we want to change, right? So basically, you're going to wipe that map clean and start to repave all the roads and come up with a new map. And that is what happens neurologically as we remake ourselves from addiction into a newer, better version of ourselves.
And what's interesting about that process, or that how that goes along. My chair's. I may have to have an emergency here. My chair doesn't give me confidence right now. The shit, I went off on that other thing and I couldn't remember what we were talking about. But the neurons and the things that are happening in the brain is part of this subject that you said you may not know that it's happening in the brain and that it's about the brain. That shifts, and probably a lot of people don't know. I didn't really make that connection the way you put it either, and I'm guessing a lot of people, I have a struggle. What's wrong? What's wrong with me? What's going on? I try to stop. I can't. I try to stop. And you took that next level and studied where this is all happening, and then how to rebuild that. And then just to add to your comment there, I think part of that bringing down the boards and bringing everything back to the foundation. If I'm not wrong, and this kind of happened to me, you discovered actually who you are. There's no. I call it a mask. There's, I used to use the name JR, and I became a different person when I kind of came together with myself. And there's such a big deal and created abilities by having that again, you never heal, you never are not addicted, but having successfully gone through that is actually bad way to do it, but a strengthening tool, right? Because you get it now. Oh, I think we lost you again there, George.
Sorry, I don't know why I keep getting put on mute.
Hey, you know how many mistakes I make in a show? So you join the party, brother.
I haven't touched anything. Maybe Barbie's muting me.
Hey, Barbie, knock it off. I know you love playing games, but you know, come on. This is good stuff here. All right, go
on. Yeah. So the thing about addiction is it. We may have these underlying values that are way deep inside of us, our fabric, but addiction just takes us hostage and takes us further and further away from any sense or connection to this underlying fabric of the person that we want to be. And
yes.
And it's so powerful. And again, the brain, the reward networks of the brain, where the dopamine is, has now taken control, and all other parts of the brain, especially the frontal cortex, which is supposed to be the check and balance. It's like Congress versus the executive branch. They're supposed to balance each other out. So the reward network says, I want reward, I want pleasure, this and that. And the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is supposed to say, dude, if we do that, here's the consequences. And so that's the check and balance that's supposed to occur. In addiction, the reward network of the brain is flexing its muscles, and it is taking control, and it doesn't matter what the front part of the brain is trying to tell it. Wow. It is now in control. And so what we try to do in recovery is reset that whole reward network, and these neural pathways that are representing the addiction, the habit that is developed, which are now super strong and emotionally packed, so they're really vibrant and strong and represent. That's what getting stuck in addiction is about. So what we do is we have to give it time for those pathways to weaken, and the way they weaken is by not continuing to use drug and alcohol or whatever addictive behaviors, and that's basically stopping the watering and the fertilizing of those pathways. I liken them to roots of a tree or a plant. And if you stop watering a tree or the roots of a tree or a plant, eventually it gets weaker and weaker and weaker and begins to go dormant. And that's what happens in recovery, is that you stop watering the pathways of addiction and they start to quiet down, while you are now introducing new rewards, normal life rewards, the new studs of the house, and allowing those new pathways to form and develop. So that's like remapping. So one map's getting quieter while the new one's being built. And then over time, as we experience more reward from the new way of being, then the whole brain begins to shift and rewire.
That is a lot of people describe the process, the path, the journey, whatever, but never in the way that you just did, because it makes a lot more sense in that that the brain wires and rewires itself depending on circumstances, environment, knowledge, all that. But I like that picture painted where the one is actually going away. You're not feeding it, you're not watering it, or I don't know if that's right, but it's going away and being replaced by the same process, but a more natural, comfortable, realistic way to do things. How come more people? And I want to get some of these questions here. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I don't know if you saw it. Hold on.
Not
right.
Oh,
that's producer Barbie. BSR is producer Barbie. So she was scowling at you there a little bit, I think.
Sorry,
Just
Barb.
kidding. Yeah, you heard him. Okay, now leave us alone. We got a big conversation going on here. Okay, Barbie, producer. All right, so I wanted to hit this one too. How can someone start the process of changing? So we just talked about, as you know, we went from here to here, from the beginning of the process and realizing, and I want to add something to this too. And then right now in the conversation, this is what the result is. That's what's happening in addiction, and from one side, one phase to the other, however you want to say that. But also, let me come back to that. Go ahead and hit this, and let me thank you, Anita. That's a great that's a great point you're making there, or a question you have there.
How can someone, start the process of change? So,
yes.
Okay, you want me to answer that?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Okay, so everything that travels through your mind, emotions, thoughts, actions, all mental life, is a function of our experiences. Okay, so the way that you are today,
Yes.
and the way that your neurons are mapped out is a result of everything you've ever experienced in your life, ever thought, ever emoted, all the actions you took, and that has caused your neurons to connect and form this map in the way that it has. And so what happens is, especially during early childhood, when we have negative experiences, which cause negative thinking, negative emoting, negative acting out, that's how the brain begins to map itself, is because early on in childhood, our brains aren't really mapped at all. I mean, they come out with they're mapped, they come out with genetic predispositions, but then we're introduced to our environments, and things start to move. And so that's why early childhood is so critical. The other part of it is our front part of our brains, the prefrontal cortexes, don't start to develop until age 6, and they don't finish developing until the mid-20s. So the young child doesn't have any way to evaluate.
Male or female, either way, male or female that ages.
Same thing. I mean, I'm sure men's are developing much longer, right? We always think of men not developing later than women.
That's why insurance. That's why insurance companies won't give you a rental car, allow you to do a rental car if you're a guy until after you're 25, right?
Yeah, I think mine's still developing, but so
that's about when your personality is also developing, to add to what you're talking about now, and that 5-year-old kind of thing, right?
Well, your personality is a combination of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, and so that is you're the compilation of that. And your personality comes as a result of all these past experiences. So your personality can always be developed, and it's formed as part of these neural pathways represent your personality, and so your personality can change also. As
just going to ask that. Yeah,
absolutely. So to answer Ali's question, you can begin to think differently. If you don't like the thoughts that are traveling through your mind, or you have some recurring negative patterns thinking, what I do as a coach is I help you deconstruct those to understand where they're coming from. What are the roots of causing you to think that way? And then we get to the heart of that matter, the root cause, and then we ask ourselves, is that true or not? Do the beliefs that lead to that way of thinking, are they true or not? Does it align with your values? And a lot of times it can be attributed, that negative thinking, to something that just happened. It isn't still true today, or it doesn't represent who you want to be. It's in a pattern in your brain because you've practiced that thinking over and over again, and it's gotten stronger and stronger. You've continued to water and fertilize that way of thinking until that root system is very prevalent in your brain, and your brain keeps going back to it, and you keep engaging in it, and so it keeps getting stronger. So the moment that you decide,
muscle, the more you use it, the more repeatable you're building a muscle, right?
Brain is just like going to the gym and doing reps on your muscles. Okay, it's exactly.
Yeah.
So the more that you keep engaging in those thought patterns that aren't serving you well, the more you're strengthening them. So it helps to understand that, because as soon as you start to think that way again, you say, no, thank you. I don't want to do reps in that thought pattern anymore. I don't want to keep engaging in it because I know it's just going to keep getting stronger and stronger, and I'll never get out of it. So then we have to construct a new way of thinking around that thing that's giving you trouble. So we go back to the root of what's causing that negative thinking, and then reconstruct that whole scenario in a different way, with new levels of thinking, new ways of thinking, new ways of emoting about that experience, new ways of acting in that experience. And then that sets the baseline for how this is that new person. This is the way that new person is going to think, feel, and behave. And then we start to practice that every day in our lives. And if we get pulled back into the old way, we say, nope, no, thank you. I'm going to go to my new way. And just like developing any new skill, athletic skill, a new language, a new instrument, the more you practice it, the stronger and better you get at it.
Yeah, so you're tweaking that to, like we said, build the muscle, and then what you were just talking about, just for clarity, I told you my IQ level, I don't know if I even have one. I'm not sure. But when you talk about the way that let's see, how do I want to put this? When you talk about the building of that and creating new pathways and changing that thought, hey, I'm going to go back. The curiosity came in when you were talking is, so you're talking about when you say situation, how I've always reacted to, somebody arguing with me, or I've always reacted to somebody or something. I reacted that way during addiction, and this is how that part of the brain reacts to the experience. So if you're changing over and your thought process is physically an action that you have to work on continually, like going to the gym, right? Is that where you were going there?
Yeah,
Or did I miss it totally?
Can I give you an example?
100%.
A lot of times,
Told you.
A lot of times it helps to give an example. Okay, so I'm going to put myself on the pedestal here, or not pedestal, but on the on the hot seat. So
that's totally different now. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do you have some sound effects for that? The flame.
We're not that's a great idea. I ought to start working on that. Get me a little button over here that you hear on the radio shows, right? Whatever.
Soundboard with some fire and some toilet flushing and all of that. Yeah.
Oh, good ones there. Good ones there.
Again, a lot of these patterns develop in childhood, and they stay with us because that's how our brains developed, and we carry them into adulthood, and not knowing how the brain works and the fact that we can change it, these patterns stay with us. Okay. So early on in my childhood, and this is where a lot of my discomfort started to develop, which I carried into adulthood. It made me uncomfortable, so I started using substances to cope. Okay, that's kind of the story that a lot of people have. All right.
Yeah.
So my dad was a high achiever and a corporate climber, always getting promoted, and so we were moving constantly. Every 12 to 18 months, I was in a new city, a new home, new school, and that wore on me, right? I didn't realize it at the time because you're just going through the experience, but I became very self-doubting. It was very uncomfortable to be the new kid all the time, feeling like you don't belong, yada, yada. You guys know the whole drill, right? And I became, that affected my ability to establish relationships. I'm very much a loner.
Really?
I get uncomfortable in social settings. Well, that's really, I'm better at it now because I've worked on it and practiced.
Got it.
Okay. So that's the point, is that you carry that with you into adulthood, and you go into a social setting like a gathering of people, and your brain, my brain automatically went to the place where I'm going into a new school. I feel threatened. I don't feel I belong. I don't feel I'm good enough. I've got to go through this again. I've got to meet a bunch of new people. I don't want to. It doesn't feel good. My brain doesn't like it. There's no reward in it. And so then bang, you go into adulthood and you go into a social setting, a corporate event or whatever, and the same exact patterns start to light up again. And every time that you engage in that or allow it to happen or don't practice something different, you are watering and fertilizing that same neural pathway that went all the way back to childhood. And so anybody that has their own special circumstances like that, you can go back to your childhood or wherever and pinpoint those exact experiences that have caused you to develop your ways of thinking and feeling and acting today. And that's what we try to do, is to deconstruct that, to say, okay, here's the reasons why. It makes sense. But I'd much rather be good in social settings. So let me imagine and envision how this would look good for me, what I want to get out of these situations, how I want to behave, how I want to feel inside, how I want to think. And so we do a lot of envisioning around these practices, and then we go out and actually practice them in real life settings. And then we realize, hey, that's not so bad. And then the brain begins to say, that wasn't so bad. It actually felt good. It actually feels a lot better than going into these situations and feeling uncertain and like crap. Why don't we do that some more? Because the brain loves reward. The brain will take you and go with you on your journey if you provide reward for it. That's why it likes dopamine and addictive substances so much, because it likes reward. But we're not doing that anymore. So now we have to give it new sources of reward. And so we have to recreate these experiences that are no longer serving us, that we're having trouble with, that are giving us unpleasantness, restructure, reconstruct them, reform them in ways that will give us pleasure, that will tie into our underlying values, the intrinsic values, the things that we want to be good at deep down, where we don't want to have regrets. We want to become that person that we're meant to be, that we want to be. That all gets wrapped up in these new experiences, all tethered together with, and then that goodness from being that way will begin to well up within you. It comes from your heart and your soul, where your values live. And then you begin to feel good about it. You keep practicing it. And before you know it, you've shifted. That entire experience will now be one that makes you feel good, that you know how to handle, that you've become adept at. And that old experience, that way that you were, has now not been fertilized. It's not been watered. It begins to quiet. It begins to go dormant, and you are no longer that person.
Wow. Okay. So see what building a picture is, what using yourself as an example. That was awesome. That mental picture, and I don't think there'd be an argument in the group here, but that mental picture nailed it. It was I totally get where you're coming. I did before, but now I'm a little more intelligent. I think I just feel a little more intelligent. And during your explanation there, it was because I needed some clarification on things you were talking about, which included exercise and so forth. By the way, before we go there, I one thought came to your head when you were talking about the envisioning and your visioning in your mind. It's like an athlete who sits there and envisions that ball going in, or that, whatever that their sport is. There's a whole lot of that, and the best ones become pros because it becomes real, right?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Do you think the brain, okay, let's take the athlete who's shooting free throws, the basketball player, right? Okay. So do you think the brain knows the difference between actually physically standing on that free throw line and shooting the shots, or sitting in your living room visualizing yourself shooting the shots? Do you think the brain knows a difference?
Oh, dude, I hope I'm answering this right. And this is a powerful question. And the answer is no, it doesn't, because
Bingo.
your body does, but your brain doesn't.
Bingo. The brain likes different ways of learning the same thing that you're trying to teach it. So visualizing counts as a mental rep for shooting the shot. So the same things that you might think about or feel when you're at that free throw line, relaxing, bending your knees, taking a deep breath. You can do all of that in your living room, closing your eyes and just reenacting, the actual motion, or even just sitting there and visualizing the motion. And the more different ways, the more times that you practice the same thing, either visualizing it or doing it in for real, all
Or
count.
combination.
All
All
counts for
combination.
repetition. That's
Yep.
that's the difference
Wow.
between going to the gym or not. You can't sit in your house and think about getting bigger muscles, and that part doesn't work.
Yeah, I know. I know that feeling because I try it quite a bit, and as you could tell, I get the results you just described. Now, as
Can I answer the question about diet and exercise?
yeah, that's what I was just going to say, because I know some people who that helps with recovery, or it changes the again, it may be back to mental, right? The endorphins that you get from actually going to the gym, or the proper diet, just to lead in for you.
Yeah. So these two things are critical, and I'll add to that sleep.
Oh, critical.
And
Okay.
I'll add diet, sleep.
We lost you, Mr. George. We lost you, like right in the middle of sleep. Oh, yeah. There's something short or something. Anyway, all things critical: diet, exercise, and you're adding sleep, which I've learned that recently.
Yeah, sleep, and then mindfulness, practicing regulating your nervous system with your mind. Those are all critical components. So basically what you're doing with all of these elements is that you are putting your brain in the best possible chance and place for it to succeed and change. So the brain doesn't innately want to change, because its primary job is to keep you safe and alive and kicking for the next day. And this goes back, you mentioned earlier about the caveman days.
Right.
So there are very hardwired elements that our brain has, many elements that are changeable, but some of these aren't. The fact that we need to eat to survive, that's why we're given pleasure when we eat, is so that we keep eating so that we can survive. Drinking water, having sex, those types of things make us feel good, so that we keep doing them, so that
those are good. Those are all good.
So that, so the species lives on. Social connectivity is important, and we were given that because we needed to band together in tribes to protect ourselves against the dinosaurs. If we didn't connect together socially, the dinosaurs would pick us off one by one. So we were taught earlier on, or wired that way, that we needed social connection. That's why the Creator gave us good feelings around, good neurochemicals around socializing with people, is because it encourages us to band together and protect each other. So the brain's number one job is to survive and allocate resources around helping us survive. So we have to nourish the brain so that it can do its job at its peak performance. And it doesn't want to change because it doesn't know what the change looks like. You haven't introduced the change that you're envisioning yet to the brain. And that's why change can be hard, is because the brain doesn't feel any reward from it yet. And it doesn't want to go to a place where there's no reward. Think about your
So
dog.
you're kind of forcing that by repetition. You're making the brain start to recognize.
You have to force it initially with the front part of your conscious brain until you practice it so much it starts to go to the back part of your brain and become automatic. But at the front part of this process, there's a lot of forcing yourself through, a lot of commitment, a lot of dedication, and a lot of creating motivation for yourself to get there, because the brain hasn't experienced the reward of where you're going yet. And it's trepidation around that, because it doesn't know if it's safe or not. The brain it wants to protect you in survival. It knows that even if you're uncomfortable right now in your way of being, you haven't died yet. So it knows
You're
that if
safe.
you won't die right now in this uncomfortable place, it doesn't know what this change looks like. And so that's why the brain has trouble coming along, which is why during this coaching process, we're working on reinforcing the rewards around what this is going to be like when you get there, so that it helps take the brain by the hand and lead it there. It's very much like training a dog. Clearly you can't go up to your dog the very first time and say, "Hey, will you sit down, please?" It's like, what? There's no reward in that for me. Then you start giving it a reward, and it starts to learn very quickly. Same thing with the human brain, is that we have to reward it for new tricks.
Wow. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Kind of like as powerful and awesome as powerful and awesome as the brain is, and we always talk about how complex it is. AI is competing against it. It can do a lot of things, but that the human brain is structurally, and I hear there's enough energy in the brain to light a house for a couple of days, or I've even heard a week or so. I mean, a small city or something. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to Pavlov, doesn't it? The brain is as unique and awesome as it is. It made me think of it because you said about the dogs. That's true. It's Pavlov. Dogs will start salivating when they see food. There's that whole reward and building that into the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just again, the diet and the exercise and the sleep are critical, because in order for the brain to want to go along,
Be healthy.
it has to be healthy, operating at peak efficiency. It can't be feeling sluggish. It can't be feeling undernourished. It can't be feeling inflamed because you're eating too much sugar and processed food. It can't be on 3 hours of sleep at night because it's fatigued already. The brain, you want it operating at peak efficiency when you're in this change process, so that it's more willing to come along with the change. And not to mention
More capable,
more willing. Not to mention that inflammation in the brain caused by sugar and processed foods is being identified to being connected to Alzheimer's, dementia, a lot of these cognitive related diseases. So there's exercise is great because it delivers blood and oxygen and other transmissions to the brain, and helps it grow and thrive. Just think about how good your body feels after you exercise. The same thing's going on in your brain. You're just rushing nutrients, blood, oxygen, and other neurochemicals into the brain to help it refresh itself, to help it strengthen, to help it glow. And so,
ooh, good word.
sleep is critical because that's when all the
Recovery, right?
that's where all the neural pruning. So let's say that you're leaving some habits behind that you're no longer using, the bad ones that aren't pleasant, that aren't. So then what happens is those begin to die off. There's chemical that will go up into your brain and pull those back down into your body to be excreted. That's the neural pruning. Toxins are pulled out of your brain. Your memories are consolidated. So every night, all the new things that you learned during that day begin to move from short-term memory into long-term memory, so that you can begin to establish those neural pathways, those connections of the new habits and behaviors that you want to form. All of that happens at night when you sleep. So
is that part of REM sleep? Is that what's happening during REM sleep?
Yeah, memory
right?
consolidation happens during REM sleep. Yes.
Yeah.
And so
Critical.
there are things you can do to help your sleep cycles, so that you get better quality sleep, so that those functions that need to happen during sleep do in fact happen at optimum levels. You can't be like jamming on your phone or watching horror movies and then go to sleep like 5 minutes later. We should be winding down. Yeah, we should be winding down, having chamomile tea, relaxing, maybe doing a little meditation, maybe doing a little journaling the last half hour before we go to sleep, because that puts your mind in a mental state where you can immediately start entering those productive sleep cycles as soon as you go to sleep, where your brain's not trying to like wind down while it's trying to sleep from all the crap you've been doing right before you went to bed. And don't drink coffee too late, because that affects the quality.
I can't do it after 2:00, man.
Yeah. And so that really gets back to this idea of diet. So what I do is everything I do during the day, I know exactly when I'm going to go work out today. I know exactly when I'm going to eat. I know what I'm going to eat. I'm a grazer now. I don't eat meals. I just eat enough to have the hunger go away. I only eat whole foods. I only eat about 12 to 14 foods ever, all day, any day, anyway. I eat a lot of red grapes, a lot of seeds, a lot of nuts. I eat, some chicken salad, very light on mayo. I have dried fruit in it. I eat a ton of spinach. I'll put Parmesan cheese in it. Parmesan's the best.
In the spinach?
Ton of spinach. I eat a half a box of spinach every night.
I love spinach.
I steam it in a bag with chicken stock, pour it into the bowl with the great tasting lemon, Parmesan cheese, a little bit of salt. I mean, I could eat that stuff all day long. And so we just need to pick whole foods, the whole food. And I pick at olives. Olives are great for you. And these are all foods that are great for your brain. You notice there's no sugar in it. No, I don't eat anything coming out of a box or a package, anything that's been processed. And what happens is that is a habit change that may start out being a little uncomfortable at the beginning because it's new, but then I'm telling you now,
same thing.
My brain will not let me go back and eat a different way. It will go kicking and screaming because it's experiencing more reward out of this new way. Yeah. It doesn't want to go back because it's getting more reward. It feels better. It doesn't feel as inflamed. It's got more nutrients, all of that. And so it just takes that initial period of a few weeks to break through this barrier where your brain doesn't know where you're going yet, doesn't have enough reward. You have to help it along.
Yeah, it's that that almost like becoming dedicated to it. You have to work harder in the beginning, and then it comes through. The food is,
and then it becomes a lifestyle. So that's what.
Then it becomes a lifestyle. Yeah,
it's a forced set of behaviors at the beginning, forced set of actions that then suddenly start to become behaviors. After a while, they become habits, and that means they've transferred from the front part of your brain where you have to work hard and think hard about them.
That's interesting.
They start to go to the back part of your brain and join the other habits, like how do I drive a car? How do I brush my teeth? How do I ride a bike? You don't have to think about those anymore. After a while, these things go back there, and your brain won't let you do anything else.
That is obviously the truth, and that's breaking down into reality what's going on, and it's kind of a fascinating picture on the food side of things. Yeah. Producer Barbie, everything you just described about, I don't think she said anything yet, but she probably will after what I'm about to say. We've been together for almost 20 years. Wow. And she has always, as long as I've known her, first worked out every day, and she does that for her mental state is what she said. But she also eats. She does red or green. I used to buy them for that was my job, and a banana and nuts and the spinaches and so forth. Exactly what you're saying, and it's all there to build that calm and build that brain's ability. She even got me kind of going there too. Quick question before I get to this, and there's a whole lot of other questions, but this is about techniques if you're not struggling with addiction. There's also a bunch more addiction questions, but what do you just think? kind of ending on the food thing here for a minute, maybe. What do you think about balance of nature, those kind of supplement stuff? You know, I mean, we're right back to using a supplement to do what we should be naturally. Do you know anything about those, or how that affects, or if there is any effect when you, because vegetables are, that's how you said, vegetables, fruits, right? What are your thoughts on that? I know this is coming out of left field, but it just made me, I just thought of it. Oh.
Sorry. By and large, if you're eating correctly, you should be able to get all the nutrients you need from the food that you eat. Okay.
What if you aren't?
Then that supplements can supplement it. So on the protein side, fish is great because it gives you a lot of fatty acids, good fatty acids, which will pull cholesterol out of your blood. So, you know, if you don't like fish, then yeah, supplements can be very helpful, or other things that you may or may not be getting through your diet. But generally speaking, you should be able to get most of what you need out of your diet. You know, I take, you know, like in the morning, my this is my breakfast, and it's a
you want to switch?
You should switch.
Can I tempt you into a switch between us?
That dark liquid does not look healthy.
It's not, but I do. She also got me drinking water. I used to never drink water. I've become a lot more healthier because of her, and she never lets me forget it. And
you're a work in progress.
I am absolutely a work in progress. Now I want to get to some of these you know, that are going back, but this was a fascinating question to me. Do you know what? I'll read it out loud. Neuroscience is fascinating. Can anyone use these techniques, even if you aren't? And I got to imagine that it's yes, but build on it a little bit. Who's not struggling with addiction at this, you know, at all.
Everyone can use these techniques. And as a matter of fact, I work with a lot of people that aren't in addiction, because addiction is only a coping mechanism. It's a stress response. It's for people that have underlying patterns that they don't like, that are uncomfortable, and they don't know how else to cope with them. So they find addictive substances. It makes it better. They get hooked, and off to the races they go. Once you stop using or drinking or behaving in an addictive way, guess what? You're still left with all the stuff that made you uncomfortable to begin with. And so that is actually the root of what we try to change, is those underlying patterns that probably started to develop early in childhood.
And create emotions and thought processes, right?
Go back to my example of moving a lot.
Exactly.
Being uncomfortable in social settings. That has nothing to do with addiction. So all that can be rewired in a positive way if I reframe it and find a new way to experience those experiences. I visualize them, picture them at first, and then I begin to practice them. They become easier and easier. I start to find joy out of being that way, being more confident, being more engaging. I start to feel that, yeah, that's the person I want to be. That feels good. My brain's excited. The neurons start to connect. They start to get stronger because there's more emotional satisfaction with it, and off we go. So it doesn't matter. And also, let's say you're not struggling with anything. Let's say you don't have any unhelpful patterns. You can unlock more potential out of your brain by going through these processes, because you know, everyone struggles either with stress or procrastination or whatever, and by going through these processes, you can examine those and reconstruct your relationship with any of those things that are maybe causing you to be not at your full potential, unproductive in any way. And so what ends up happening is you become a master of your mind. You understand how your mind works, And when anything surfaces that is troubling or getting in your way of being better, you can examine those and deconstruct them to find out what's behind them, and then reconstruct them in a new way and begin to practice those. And so you're almost like moving from the passenger seat of your car where your brain's driving, and you flip the seats, you go into the driver's seat and you grab a hold of your brain, and now you're able to steer it. And so it's almost like every day, all day, every day, you're working with your brain to understand where it's at. So for example, the diet, the exercise, and all of that feeds into partnering with your brain and allowing it to be its best. But also your brain needs rejuvenation. So at certain parts of the day, I'll pull out of my thinking analytical mode and give my brain a rest. And I'll go do something else that it enjoys to give it a 15-minute respite. So then I can then ask it to come back and re-engage. So many of us just think the brain is there to serve us, but we don't have to do anything to help it or engage with it. And that's not it. The brain will go with you wherever you want to go, but you've got to be kind to it. We spend all this time combing our hair and putting cream on, and we're kind to our skin, we're kind to our hair, we're kind to, we go to the gym and so we can look great in the mirror, but who's ever, giving the brain the respect that it needs? And so when you get unpleasantness in your brain, if we were more kind to it, more respectful, and we partnered with it and gave it what it needs, it would respond.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. When you said you're paying attention to all these things. I like to do this every once in a while. Give my head a little bit of a breather there.
I like that.
You talked about, well, my son is too. I love it. I do it a couple times a year probably, and it's funny, just to sidetrack a little bit here, but it's funny because when you can feel the subtle differences in the air, of the temperature in the air. That the first time I did it was like 2 years ago or something. And so I was all excited, happy. I've been wanting to do it. It's just easier. And I went outside from the shop, and all of a sudden there was this little bit of warmth and this little bit of cool, like in the same space. And it was wild. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. Hey, look at, when we're talking about self-improvement all the way around, obviously addiction is bringing that challenge, maybe a little bit more, needing more challenge in the self-improvement. Well, that's not true, but you start off lower when you're in the addiction, and you got to, like you said, if you don't have it, you just get better, right? And this makes sense here. And by the way, there were a couple of other ones, the daily habits and that, but I wanted to get from you on, anger issues. Yeah, that's a really important one. Do you think that addiction recovery, and this probably goes into the type of drugs, your history, your makeup, your physical makeup, but is it different for everybody? Is it basically the same with subtle differences, or is it a brand new experience, for a totally different experience from me and my neighbor and his neighbor and her neighbor and so forth? How does that work?
So I like to refer to it as recovery is ice cream, and there are different flavors of ice cream. At the end of the day, it's still all ice cream. And so what it is, because the neural pathways have to get rewired into a different version of yourself. That is the same for everyone. Coming off different substances, the withdrawals are more or less painful, all of that. But at the end of the day, you are trying to rebuild yourself into a different version of yourself. That is the truth for everyone. And the physiological representation of that change is the reorganization of the neural pathways. Okay. What is different for every person is what that new life looks like. Everybody's different in terms of what they like. As they begin to try to map out and structure their new life, all the activities that they're going to pursue, everybody likes different things. So that structure of the house is going to look for different for everyone, and the values on which they're set and the motivations are different for everyone else. And so
Yeah,
that's
it's going to affect that. It's going to affect that, right? What your values and your everything else is going to affect what the recovery becomes.
correct. And so that's why this is a very individualized process. And one of the things I don't like about rehab, and they do a good job of like separating you from the drugs and the alcohol and giving you some broad knowledge, but it's kind of a cookie cutter thing that here's just some general education, but that recovery process that's going to work for that person in terms of the very specifics of what their life is going to look like is different for everyone that's in rehab or anyone in the world that's trying to change. And so, that's why this partnership with the coach is critical, because, we get into the weeds about what you like, what you want, and build your life around that. Because again, this new life has to be rewarding in order for you and your brain to want to go do that. And if it's not, you won't. And so so these foods I eat, just as an example, my two vegetables are spinach and broccoli. I don't like
I love
asparagus,
those.
even though it's good for me. I don't like beets and alfalfa or Brussels
I
sprouts.
like alfalfa. Oh, yeah. What about asparagus? Did you say asparagus? The long ones, right?
Yeah, I don't like asparagus. I don't like Brussels sprouts. So even though you're
I
good,
agree.
I don't eat them because I wouldn't enjoy it. So I'll just eat more spinach and more broccoli. So that's like some
I
people.
agree.
Some people build their life around spinach and broccoli. Some people build their life around, Brussels sprouts, and that's a really good metaphor. Okay, and so,
Yeah, I agree with that entire menu selection, but I do like the asparagus, right? The long, in either a nice Italian kind of, how you put that on your bread and so forth, either made with, like an olive oil, or eat butter with a steak. Oh my God.
olive oil better than butter.
Yeah, I know it is way better. Well, margarine is also even better, worse than that, right?
Well, it's a component of the fat that's in it, and the
Yeah,
type of fat. The type of fat is critical.
right.
There are some good fats and there are not good fats. The saturated trans fats are not good.
Oh, that's what needs to get out of my life for sure. It kind of has already, but jumping back a question on the what are the effects if you don't have, you're not struggling with addiction, and just a little bit of a twist. And I think this answer might be get rid of the alcohol, and that helps. But he's asking here, Don, thank you for your question. Such an eye opener. Can rewiring the brain help with overcoming anger too? Because that's obviously another big deal. A lot of times you see the same people in their recovery of the same couple of things sometimes, but because alcohol or drugs can do all sorts of different things.
Alcohol and drugs are like gasoline on the fire. They only amplify what's already there. And this one's near and dear to my heart, because you're talking to one of the guys who used to be angry, defensive, very emotionally reactive. And that was a function of my upbringing, the discomfort that I felt. In addition to all the moving that I did, I got a whole lot of belt whippings and some additional physical discipline. I was sexually abused by some older boys while I was in 5th grade. I went away to boarding school in 9th grade, and my parents moved overseas, so I was doing a lot of fending for myself. The net effect of all of that, and that I'm not, trust me, there's people all of us have experienced very similar things, worse, better, whatever. Okay. That's not the point. The point is that I developed emotions thoughts, and actions around that upbringing, which produced anger, self-doubt, low self-esteem, defensiveness, hyperactivity, um, you name it.
So as you're rewiring, all of that's being rewired, right? As you're recovering from as your journey, that's part of it.
As I mentioned,
the rewiring.
As I mentioned, addiction lays on top of these
Yeah.
underlying discomforts or
Yes.
things, unhelpful patterns, anger, hyperactivity, hypersensitivity, all of it. And so you're dealing with addiction on the top. But even if you don't have addiction, or even if you do, once you get addiction out of the way, you're dealing with these underlying issues. Anger is no different than any other behavior or thought or feeling. It's a representation in your brain that has been strengthened and fortified over time because you've continued to engage in anger. So, yes, it can be rewired because, like anything else, if we stop engaging in it and find other ways to handle what we perceive as threats, and usually we're getting anger because we perceive something as a threat, which means that we were threatened in our past in some way that we view as a threat. And so we have to then dive back deep into those initial occurrences to unwrap them, unpack them, and say, okay, here's why we're feeling threatened. Maybe we shouldn't feel threatened anymore. And I can tell you from personal experience, the stuff I used to get angry about and feel threatened about, oh my God, I was making this stuff up in my mind. The amount of times I was actually threatened compared to the times I felt like I was threatened, 100 million to 1.
Yeah.
And so, yes, anything that we think, feel, behave, actions, etc., can be rewired. It's a matter of stopping engaging in the previous behavior or experiences and starting to unpack and reconstruct these things that were giving us trouble, and then designing new ways to experience them. And over time, meditation is a great way to just the anger. Typically, people that are angry have a nervous system that's always on high alert. They're reactive, right? And there's two states of the nervous system. One is sympathetic, which is activated, and then there's extreme of that, which is stressed out, activated, and then there's the parasympathetic, which is rested and relaxed and digested. And so what part of what I teach is the ability to move back and forth between those two states by your actions, by your mental activity. And so that if we can downregulate people into a calmer state through their diet, through exercise, through mindfulness, meditation, other practices, playing with dogs, whatever it takes, and you practice those things.
Did you hear mine barking in the background over there?
I didn't, but I love you even more because I've got two of them laying right here.
I got two of them right there. I got one that's they're both rescues. One's about 125 pounds, loves to run. He's a Doberman Hound mix. And the other one that I was referring to is my little girl, who's 68 pounds. She's like a mixture of, I don't know what, but sometimes her snout looks like a boxer, but I've heard also and can understand a little pit, a little terrier, because their body's all weird. She looks like a barrel, but just the cutest, most fun-living dog in the world. She's got a great personality. Sorry, I had to advertise that. I love them. What?
And what do they do for you? Tell me about the inner experience that you experience when you're with and experiencing your dogs.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, great question. And by the way, we still got a couple of questions. I got a couple of things here. But the exercises we've already talked about in a sense, right? And so kind of combine what we're talking when you know what I'm feeling. The most extreme answer is I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. I've had your story, and I went to 3 different high schools, 8 different elementaries, I've been to almost I've been to almost, I think there's only one continent I haven't been to, and, you know, every state, and lived in dozens of them, all that. Mine was because I grew up in a military family, but same kind of thing going on. And my parents went and overseas together at times too. So, and no worries. It actually did a little bit different for me, although your story sounds like my sister's, where she wasn't comfortable with that moving. Whereas me, that's why I am who I am. I'm a salesman. You know, I grew up a salesman, and now I'm that. But the dogs, they have actually made me a more caring person. They have actually, I mean, they're my family, and I became worthy of them quite a bit after they were in me. They taught me how to become that next level, how to become authentic is a word that I've heard a lot this week. And I believe being authentic, because the dog will love you no matter what. I mean, they seriously do. These guys love me so much they don't like to be too far away from me. It sounds like your one is like that. But you asked how I feel, and I'm just scratching the surface there. But I am more comfortable now in personal relationships, besides my family, in how the relationship has grown with these two guys. I've had Boomer's the big one. Boomer, I think he's 7.5 now. Raised him from a puppy. Actually got him for somebody else who I've always taken care of him. So, you know, he came over with me. And then Daisy, she's like a year less, and she was pinned up in a pin her whole life. Well, for the previous 3 years before that, she was on a concrete slab with a fence around it, and really never had any interaction with people. And actually, Barbie made me get her. I was looking at somebody else, and we were talking about it back and forth because Boomer needed a friend. I was his whole life at that point. It was just me and him, and I thought I was doing something right. I had to get over some jealousy with him because it was just me and you, Pops. Come on. So he actually now, because of Daisy, is also higher energy, a happier dog. But the point is, they made me a better person. And that came through another person who made me a better person. So yeah, that's how I feel.
You know, it's remarkable to just hear you talk about it and how much you light up, and what you feel
100%
comes through the screen. So it sounds like they really help your nervous system. They calm you, they put you at ease. Okay. So there's an example. You have an element in your life, whether it's animals, gardening, cooking, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, walking in nature, journaling, practicing gratitude, all these things, you kind of experience them, you figure out which ones really work for you. You put a package of them together that really help regulate your nervous system into this calmer state. And so then that's part of the job, is that we teach you is how to build these systems and practices that help you go in and out of these nervous states on demand. But if you could spend more time in the calm, relaxed and digested state, which is kind of the daydreaming state, it's really hard to get angry from that state. You have to come out of that state, go into the sympathetic state, go into the stressed out state where your body's starting to release cortisol and adrenaline and all these other things. And you have a ways to travel before you can get angry. Oh, wow. Whereas if you're always highly activated and intense, the road to get angry is not very far. And so, so that, that's part of the answer, is to be able to regulate your nervous states and just practice and surround yourself with more calming influences in your life so that you're down regulated, so you just don't react. the way that you have in the past.
When you were talking about that, you made one of the examples in the tools that you need to use was walking in nature. And I don't know if you've experienced or whatever, but walking barefoot on grass is another way to you feel that difference, because all of nature is alive. So walking in nature, is absolutely, the one of the many things you need to do. And on a daily habit, couple quick questions here. On a daily habit, what would you suggest would be at least, well, one daily habit that kind of is the core of your lifestyle now?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend the first half hour and the last half hour of everyone's night, they re-examine and take a hard look at what they're doing with that time. When you wake up in the morning, is the phone the first thing in your hands? Are you spending any time working with your brain to gear it up for what's about to happen in the next 16 hours before you go to sleep again? Are you giving it instructions? Are you visualizing how you want things to go that day? Are you practicing? This person's asking about mental clarity. Are you focused?
Yes.
Do you have a meditation practice where you're narrowing in, focusing on one thing and allowing and building a practice around that ability to focus so that you're good at eliminating distractions? Because I think a lot of us get caught up in this world where we're distracted, things are coming at us. We have this urge to reach for our phones always, and that's just nervous energy. It's draining resources. So
Yes.
that focus and clarity are things that we can practice. And there's a bunch of different meditation practices out there that, guided, non-guided, musical ones, nature related ones. Calm has an app, you can listen to oceans crashing.
I use that. I like that app. I use it on my laptop and set it next to my bed. It's awesome.
Okay. So
I love the stories.
So with the brain in the morning rituals, what I call it, maybe develop a half an hour of different practices that you like, that represent you taking your brain by the hand and wading deep slowly into the shallow end of the water of the day and beginning to say, okay, we're partners here. I'm going to love you today. I'm going to be kind to you. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to exercise this and that. Let's get focused.
You're going to be a good friend, huh?
Yeah, let's get focused together so that we can get the most out of this day. Really, in addiction, we talk about living one day at a time. I'm telling you, for everyone, my definition of recovery is the endless pursuit of being the best version of yourself. Nowhere in that is there the word addiction or the requirement to be an addict. Everyone should be in recovery, which is the endless pursuit of being the best version of yourself. Tomorrow's not here. Yesterday's behind you. We learned from yesterday, but we focus on today, what we can control. And let's focus on intention, making every minute packed with meaning. Okay. And then you begin to design your life that way. Before you know it, 3-4 weeks down the road, that becomes a lifestyle. It's filled with a bunch of good habits, a bunch of great thinking, a bunch of great emotions. Your brain's starting to feel the reward from it. You just feel lighter and you're just attacking life instead of just being stuck.
Oh, that's absolutely what people need to hear and what people need to believe. And kind of to wrap it up, to put bookends up on this, by the way, great conversation. Being able to look at things differently is fantastic. But I want to kind of, this is the last question. I don't think I've missed any. There were some comments, Barbara's rude, comments and stuff like that. But hey, by the way, before we get to this question, and say our goodbyes and so forth, put in your contact information. I think guests can only, for whatever reason, can only put it in the private chat, but I'll copy that and put it into the comments section, because there's always, you saw there was 100 or so people here at one point in the show, but we get a lot that, it's a podcast, right? It's recorded. So you get a lot of people that can watch it at the time they can watch it. And so inevitably I get a question on there, and I'm not the expert. Like you said, I'm that Joe Blow, I'm that average dude. So I like to be able to push that information request to you, because you're the expert, not me. So anyway, before your final thought here, and I know what it's going to be. It's so obvious when you do actually think about it, when you do actually hear about it. It's common sense science that our body's very complicated. So we really have to have people like you educate, give us a science class, right? To educate us, to help us through this path. But in the final question here, how do you help people who struggle to believe change is possible? And I think that imagery is kind of that rewiring stuff is what this was always leading to, right?
Yeah. So again, change can be hard because we think it is, and our brain doesn't know the reward yet. So it hasn't experienced it yet. So that's why we believe it's hard.
You have to push it through.
Push it through a little bit, help it along. There's some faith involved in that, the science is proven. Okay, neuroscience has proven that change is possible. And there's all kinds of evidence out there of people that have changed. And as a matter of fact, I would ask, is it Matt? If I were talking to Matt,
yes,
I would ask him, we would go back in his life, and I guarantee you that we would uncover change that has occurred in his life if he's willing to see it. And so then we would find evidence in his own life that he can relate to where change was evident. And so then that begins to, what happens with this, I don't think change is possible. That's a limiting belief. That's a limiting belief built on a set of assumptions that we would try to break down with evidence in his life that he has changed before in positive ways. And then we would use that as leverage, as a springboard for whatever else he wants to change. And so that would be my response.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So final thoughts. And like I said, please put your contact information. This is a very, it's a different way to look at recovery than most people talk about, in that it's more stable, it's more realistic, it's more educational, and like you said, the bottom line is you're just changing your brain, you're rewiring that, but it's not difficult. It's just action. It's just consistent. You talked about the dogs. The best thing that I ever did with the dogs in training, you become consistent. And so consistency is something that continually builds on a good thing, or bad things, good things. Final thought, my friend.
Yeah. Just, hope and encouragement to people, as, we've tried to talk about today, that, whether it's addiction, whether it's just some underlying limiting beliefs or unhelpful patterns, whatever's getting in your way, it is possible. You're right. It is a program of action and consistency, because you can't expect your brain, you can't dive into this for a few days and then stop and then pick it up later on. I mean,
It's all done.
We have spent a lifetime developing who we are today. Think about 100%. All the repetitions that occurred to get to where we are. So now we're just going to shift. We're going to say we don't like those experiences. We don't like those repetitions. We're going to try a different path, and we're going to rep at that. And that's really what this is. But believe me, it's not an endless process. If you're motivated and committed, you'll begin to see results in weeks. And by the time you get to 90 days.
In weeks. Yeah, that makes sense. In weeks, right? And then you got to stay with it to reinforce.
correct. But by the time you get to 90 to 120 days, if you're on it,
I've heard that.
you can have transferred something into a hope, to a, a belief, to a, while this is starting,
Reality.
I'm starting to feel different, to a lifestyle change, to where
Yeah, new
now,
reality, really,
to
right?
where it's embedded in you, and you no longer will go back because your brain likes better where it is now. So that's why coaching helps, is because it, like my program, I stick with people for 90 days. So I take them far enough to where,
Gotcha.
to where there's, hopefully no going back at that point.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that was a fascinating discussion. Let's do it again. I want to keep going on, and I know people would keep asking questions here if we do. I've got another interview coming up behind me. Otherwise, we'd be talking for the rest of the morning. Hopefully, it's been fantastic. Like I said, while I'm doing there'll be a short video at the end, like in the beginning, and something just beeped at me. And then I'll wrap up the show for a little bit to give you time to, while you're in the green room, to give you time to put your contact information. Why don't you wave to everybody, sir?
Yeah. Hey, nice to meet everyone. Thanks for coming.
You bet. And thank you so much. Go ahead and throw that stuff in there. All right. Well, that was, as expected, that was a fantastic show. And I mentioned yesterday that subject, one of them, I was really I circled it on the calendar because of the subject matter, because it's personal. It's allowing personal growth, which obviously is always important. I'll be putting in the same circle on the next day's date, because George and I have been talking about this back and forth information for a little bit. So and I've circled that this day, this moment right now, to on the calendar to really take a look for. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of a little excited about it. I got a little bit, because one thing about the show, there's many things about it, but one thing is I get to learn new ideas. I'm not a smart guy, but I'm a curious guy. And George, this is a great comment if you're hearing me here. I love this. I don't know if you guys ever watch Ed Lasso. I don't watch the show, but I see the clips all the time, and it's a very great show for self-improvement and all that. Just the lessons that Ed comes across with. He's a high school football coach, got divorced and had this thing, whatever. And I don't know the story, but now he's a football coach, a soccer coach for a very bad professional team who he brings along. And one of the lessons that he relayed on during one of the episodes, he talked about, a poet. He talks about the story one time of in a darts game that was being played against with a bet that had to do with the team, which Ed took on because he was harassing the actual owner, now divorced husband and wife, very wealthy, very arrogant, very self-absorbed, and his wife, who's now his boss and seems to be a pretty good, well, the character is a very good person. Anyway, so the guy said, "Hey, you want to make a wager on darts?" There was obviously a lead up to that, but I don't want to bore everybody. Do you want to? Oh, good. I see the text is there now. I'll do that shortly. Does he wanted to make a wager? This past owner that lost the team in the divorce. And he says, let's put 10,000 pounds on it. And goes, woo, that's a little rich for me. How about this? What if, and all this time he said, oh, darts, it's a cute game. And he was throwing at the dartboard and kind of hitting it and whatever. And he said, he says, you know, I can't afford that, but how about this? If I win, no, if you win, you pick the lineups for the rest of the year, which obviously is a big deal to this guy. And he said, if I win, you stay away from the owner's box while she's a part of that team. And he goes, oh, okay. The owner guy did. And then he goes, oh, I forgot. I've got my really fancy, perfectly weighted, you know, in other words, hey, I'm going to kick your ass because now I just hooked you. And then Ted goes, oh, I forgot I was left-handed. Boop, hits a bullseye. And so as they were playing the game, he came upon the story right at the end. The game was, Ted needed all those points to win. And, you know, it's very hard combination he had to do. And so as he was starting that final round, he says, you know, people used to always judge me. They would always judge me. And it really used to bug me. It really bothered me. And one day I was picking his kid up from school, and on his way home on this fence was this sign painted, be curious, not judgmental. And then he ended up winning the thing. But that story is powerful. I mean, the setup was good from the show standpoint, obviously, but the actual statement is powerful because, like we talk all the time, say hi to people. You know, we are all on this earth traveling our own path, but it's a group. It's a group thing to do. I've got a couple more questions. Sorry, George. I've got a couple more questions. Let me see what they're saying here. So inspiring, George. This is a must. Oh, that's Jennifer. You answered one of her questions earlier. This is a must watch for anyone looking to change their life. Here, actually, while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to try and, I'm not able to comment. It's not showing. Okay. I'm just going to do, this is sloppy the way I did it, but I don't want to sit here and talk about it for the next, I'll clean it up later. There, George, oh, no, that's not what I want. I want this one. Come on, Calendarly, get out of my way. This is getting comments. There we go. And sorry, guys, that was boring as hell, but I did want to get this going. And George, yeah, I cut off the thing, but I went fast on it. Okay, so as Jennifer says, I agree. This is a must watch for anybody wanting to change their life, and kind of where I was going and why I've been so excited about this particular subject for quite a while. Okay, so and then Brent, I don't know if Branson asked before, but anyway, while George, story is so powerful, recovery is truly possible. So great job, everybody. Great. Like always, we appreciate your support. We're going to be right back here in a couple of minutes here. And I am going to have a little video that closes out, kind of talks about some other things and so forth. And I will, sorry, hit the wrong button there. I hope I can make it through the next one. Oh my goodness. I've been stumbling a little bit this morning. So I got to rewire that. So, anyway, so, at this point, my name is Rod Duff. The show is Insights in Straight Talk with Rod Duff and producer Barbie. And we're going to start looking at one of the folks on my team, started talking about, let's pull sound off of each of the videos and put those on Spotify, which I obviously makes a lot of sense. So I'll tell you all about that. And in the meantime, say hi to somebody. Go shake somebody's hand. Hi if you don't know them. Give them a compliment. Don't get all up in their Kool-Aid, but give them the other day. I told this story yesterday too. The other day I was walking the dogs, and this lady passed by us. Never seen her before, but she was just trucking along with the opposite direction, and as she went by, all of a sudden, about 2 feet, 2 feet later, all of a sudden, there was this beautiful smell of cologne. And so I had to stop and say, "Hey, ma'am." And luckily she didn't run away, but yes. And I said, "Are you wearing perfume?" And she said, "As a matter of fact, I am." And I said, "Sorry to bother you, but I couldn't resist. Whatever that perfume is, it smells fantastic. Have a great day." And then I kind of we went our different way, but I saw her face lit up, and I believe she had probably a little bit better day because somebody acknowledged her. And that's what we have to do with our neighbors and our friends, and we have to learn from people who are professionals, but we have to acknowledge a lot of stuff we don't know. And with that, my friends and my family and all the folks, I am out.
Hundreds of trillions of dollars coursing through our economic veins, there exists a pathway where no U.S. citizen needs endure poverty. Every child should be shielded from involuntary hunger and thirst. By eradicating greed and corruption, we pave the way forward. This chapter delves into the rationale behind our governmental expenditure and prompts a critical inquiry into how our leaders allocate our resources.